So let me get this straight. All of Canada and all we get is one state out of it? Come on, Guerin, what you talking about?
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And yes, we will be talking about the Seattle Kraken. They will be getting ready to head to Florida once NHL play resumes. And yeah, why not get a few extra days in Florida? But we're also going to talk about the Four Nations. And yeah, I got to start with some big news here because some of you may know this, but I was a political science major. And the idea that an entire country could just become one state in another country is wild to me. Maybe I'm just being too literal. I don't know. This is from comments from General Manager of Team USA for the Four Nations Faceoff, Bill Guerin, saying that, among other things, that he appreciates the current presidential administration and their tariff threats, as well as talk of making Canada the 51st U.S. state, and how that, quote, ratcheted up intensity in the fight-filled matchup in the preliminary round of USA versus Canada in the Four Nations Faceoff. Now, there's so many things that I find interesting in these comments, including that the GM of USA Hockey has apparently extended an invitation to the current presidential administration. Will they show up in Boston? I'm not sure. Mar-a-Lago and Boston, not really the same. But I just find it so interesting, especially because on the Canadian side of the Four Nations Face-Off, of course, what we've been seeing is Canadians booing the U.S. national anthem. So those comments seemed isolating, not to mention, again, ridiculous. How do you make an entire country, multiple time zones, just one additional state? Also, I was just in Washington, D.C. for a baby shower. How does the nation's capital feel? Taxation without representation. Anyway, that was some interesting news I got while I landed back here in headquarters. But of course, we know the Four Nations Face-Off is headed. All signs point to USA and Canada for the ultimate prize, or first place, or I don't know if they get rings or medals or a trophy. There's like a team trophy. But I joined the squad show once again this week and talked about a few things there. And I am grateful, though, that we have not one, but two Locked On NHL hosts, boots on the ground, Trey Matthews, and my co-host of the Women's Hockey Report, Rachel Donner. So let's hear what they had to say about the tournament to date. And then I'll tell you why I think at least some of what they said is wrong.
Hi, this is Rachel Donner from Locked On NHL and Locked On Flyers, here with Trey Matthews of Locked On Devils. We're both here in Boston for the NHL Four Nations Face-Off, and it has been an incredible tournament so far, right?
Absolutely. The game against Team Canada and Team USA on Saturday, it generated 4.4 million viewers. That is the most watched non-Stanley Cup Finals game since 2019. This has been a big success, Rachel.
Yeah, and they've absolutely done a great job to set the stage for a rematch in the final on Thursday night, USA versus Canada, but this time with a home crowd for the United States. What do you think that'll mean?
Well, we saw the crowd be put into a lather up in the Bell Center, and now it's coming to American soil. So far, the crowd has been tremendous, at least from my end. And now that you got Team Canada and Team USA, respectfully, the two headliners for this tournament, I expect for it to be absolutely loud. You and I are probably going to have to get here a little bit earlier than usual because I think traffic is going to be a little hectic down here in Boston.
Absolutely. Now, both coaches spoke to the media ahead of Thursday's game, but this is a couple days out now. And I think they're being a little cagey about their lineups and decisions that'll be made for the Thursday night game.
And rightfully so, because you don't want your team to be predictable. I think that's the big thing. And usually we see it in hockey in general, where if a player is dealing with an injury, you don't really go into specifics. You try to be as vague as possible. You say upper body, lower body, all of that. And I think Team USA and Team Canada, they're trying to throw a curveball at one another. And honestly, I'm not going to complain about it, because that means we're in store for another great matchup. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, and this tournament being best on best, I mean, you could make an argument for Sweden having been the most consistent in the tournament, having not won or not lost in regulation the entire time. But USA Canada is what people wanted, right?
Yeah, I mean, going into this tournament, Team Sweden was actually my sleeper, because I know what Jesper Bratt is capable of. And you saw Sam Ersson. He wasn't even supposed to be in this tournament originally. Correct. And he did a phenomenal job in the game against Team USA. Team Sweden, they did not want to leave this tournament empty-handed. They had no shot of going to the championship game, but still, you're playing for pride. You're playing for something a little bit bigger. And I think that's the whole point of this tournament. That's the beauty of it, which is you're playing for something a little bit bigger, because I've said it many times on my show. You don't want to put on a poor performance for the country you're representing, because that's not very patriotic of you, if you ask me, but respectfully, just a little joke. But in all seriousness, the players are treating this like a game 7, and you just see it in the product.
Absolutely. And I think, at least my observation from all the players that we talked to on Tuesday ahead of Thursday's game, like, everybody is all business, and it feels like the NHL is a whole other world from what these guys are experiencing right now and in this moment.
I agree with you. And the thing is like, I've even asked some of the players, like, how does this help grow the game? And Sidney Crosby, he was very optimistic about how this was going to turn out, and he was right. And like I said about the viewership from the game against Canada and the USA, so many people were talking about it, from diehard fans, casual fans, media members. It was buzzing all throughout social media. It was just incredible to see. And honestly, this can open up the door for fans who are trying to get into hockey, or fans who are not really who weren't really interested in hockey now. And this is what I was predicting for this overall tournament, which is it can open up the door for so many other fans. And I even have friends who were texting me saying, like, I don't normally watch hockey. Like, I wasn't in as locked in as hockey as I used to be, no pun intended, but now I am because of this tournament.
Exactly. And I think, obviously the biggest news to come out of Tuesday, with all the injuries and illnesses that have kind of run rampant around this tournament, we got a curveball from USA head coach Mike Sullivan that Quinn Hughes, defenseman, Vancouver Canucks, is on his way to Boston to perhaps participate. As we know, Charlie McAvoy sustained an injury that led to a medical issue that required him to be hospitalized. And Sullivan was very, I think, respectful about the whole situation, trying to maintain some privacy there, and said that the Bruins would kind of be handling the follow-up on that with McAvoy. But like, if Quinn Hughes can play in this game, which is the big question here, right? Like, what do you think that would mean for Team USA?
Well, two parts for it. First and foremost, we wish the very best to Charlie McAvoy. We wish him a speedy recovery and in good health. He was vital in the game against Canada, because he laid a big hit on Connor McDavid that swung the momentum back into USA's favor, because the great 97 got the scoring going early for Canada, right, but McAvoy kind of put an end to it with his big hit, and the players acknowledged it. So losing him is definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you talk to both coaches, and, Team USA coach would say, that Cale Makar is the best defenseman out there for Team Canada, making an impact. And then Coach Cooper says that Charlie McAvoy is like the best defenseman on the USA side, making an impact. So there's a very healthy amount of respect on both sides for both of those players. But then, the potential of the curveball of Quinn Hughes is a very interesting possibility.
And the second part to what I was saying is like you alluded to it, which is because it's been determined that somebody for sure cannot play for Team USA.
Right.
The rumor is that maybe it'll be Jake Sanderson because he was originally put into this tournament to replace the at first injured Quinn Hughes. Right. We'll see what happens. That's just speculation on my end. Nothing's for certain, but both Hughes brothers in this tournament, that's what a lot of people, including myself, were talking about. And Quinn Hughes, the reigning Norris Trophy winner in this tournament and playing alongside his little brother, Jack, honestly, I'm looking forward to it if that actually does come into fruition.
Yeah, and obviously this is as of recording. That is the latest status we have. Things could absolutely change on that front. But yeah, I think, going from the Tkachuk brothers, switching gears into the Hughes brothers is always a fun thing in USA hockey with their tradition of brothers playing for the team. But I guess turning our attention to Thursday, will the lineups and who is actually eligible and able to play given all the injuries and illnesses, does that affect any predictions for the outcome?
Honestly, no. I think similar to what Mike Sullivan said during his press conference, I think the reason why players like Austin Matthews, Matthew Tkachuk, the main reason why they were out supposedly for precautionary reasons, or why Brady Tkachuk, after he went crashing into the post, tried to give it a go, but was deemed ruled out by Sullivan. I think it's just better to take these next couple days easy, rest up, and get ready for what players are treating like a Game 7. So honestly, I'm not too worried about it. Things can change, but on my end, no cause for concern.
Yeah, same. I think that all of these guys are extremely competitive. They want to win. This is the biggest stage for them. And I think that they're going to put it all out there. And like I said, NHL season be damned. This is the most important thing to them right now. And I fully expect this crowd to fuel that for sure here in Boston.
So excited. Pre-game, lineups, national anthems, the actual game, the goals, the penalties. I'm looking
It's going to be real physical.
We saw 3 fights in the first 9 seconds in last Saturday's game. Now,
We won't see that again.
Sam Bennett, I just got done with his press conference. He doesn't anticipate for that to happen again, but never say never. We'll see what happens. But I think led by the Tkachuk brothers, their emotional and dogged determination, you never know. But I know one thing. I think this potentially can become game of the year, or maybe game of the decade. I don't really know, but a lot of people on social media, they're saying this is in store for one of the greatest hockey games in recent memory.
Yeah, and I'm sure Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews will have something to say about that.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Connor McDavid has lost a Game 7 before, and we saw it in the docuseries. He was really upset, and I'm sure he doesn't want that same feeling again, being oh so close, but ultimately falling short, especially since you're representing your country. And as a lot of us know, hockey is one of the main sports in Canada, but the talent coming out of America, don't underestimate it.
Yeah, this is a pretty stacked USA squad. Very excited for Thursday's game, and both of us will talk about it when the time comes. I will be on Locked On NHL on Friday to wrap up the tournament with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. Stay tuned.
This episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at Select. Quote, in sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, to the Four Nations Faceoff final, to the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of the US's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. That sets SelectQuote apart. In what sets What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer a one-size-fits-all policy, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage up to $5 million. No medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. SelectQuote. They shop and you save. All right. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here. Just barely made it back to Tulsa in the middle of a storm. As I said in the first segment, I was in Washington, D.C. celebrating a good friend of mine and her partner having their first child. And I'm so excited for them. I cannot wait to see the new baby. And all of that good stuff. But I'm glad I made it back. And I want to dive into some Kraken specific stuff because there have been some things, including some interviews with management talking about the Supersonics coming back and things of that nature. We'll get into that throughout the week. Do want to stay on Four Nations for a little bit. Speaking of the Seattle Kraken and Four Nations, Kaapo Kakko didn't get a lot of play for Team Finland. Almost got a goal. I've seen that goal so many different angles. And, you know, I saw an angle early on. It must have been on NHL.com because I went to the ice chest and I couldn't find it. But I said on the Locked On NHL show that aired on Monday, okay, you know, maybe it was Barkov's goal. And then immediately after recording that, I was like, actually, maybe it wasn't Barkov's goal. But, you know, I would have liked to see more Kaapo Kakko, obviously, because this is the Locked On Kraken show. But I said I disagreed with something that Trey and especially Rachel said. And listen, I know I live in the United States. I know hockey's big in Canada. I think, and I said this before on the squad show, there's a great potential to make this more than just USA Canada. And the whole thing about that game being one of the greatest of the decade, I mean, I guess so, sure. That being said, the Olympics are literally next year and NHL players will be back. I think I love that people are embracing the international game. There's a part of me that's a little bit frustrated that people are surprised that this was going to be great hockey. My thing was always, how is the NHL going to package it? I've said this on social media. There was also a time where PK Subban, he was really lighting into Team Sweden against Finland, actually, and saying, hey, the stars have to show up. The stars have to show up. And he was kind of cut off so that they could do another promo for USA versus Canada. I don't know. Is it just me? Or how about y'all? Let me know in the comments. I mean, I wanted a little bit more about all of the teams, not just the United States, not just Canada. And yes, you're still going to talk about that matchup. And if there was drama, I mean, the fights, again, I talked about it on the squad show. If you're an everyday or an OGer, you probably know how I feel about fights. But I mean, I want more. We can be better. We can do better. Of course, you're going to lean into the United States and Canada because these companies and the NHL is in North America, specifically in the United States. That being said, these are still NHL guys. It's not like you don't know where they're coming from. Oh, and something that burnt my dang grits. I said this on social media. I said it on the squad show, and I said it in the clip that I'm about to play. But for the love of Pete, the radio broadcast saying over and over again, Kaapo Kakko, former Ranger player. At some point, I felt like, just tell us that you have a gag order and you can't say Seattle Kraken. You know what I'm saying? Like, But like, that was so weird. Yes, Capo Caco is a former member of the Rangers, but he is also an active member of the Seattle Kraken. So are those very specific? Yes. And if I felt that way about Capo Caco, I mean, how many times were the Predators mentioned? UC Saros, Philip Forsberg, just as two examples. So I think that what I hope for next year in the Olympics is that we do a little bit better. But hey, have no fear, because your girl right here is accredited for the Olympics. And so I will do my part to make sure that there is more international flavor to Olympic coverage. But as I mentioned, I got to chat with Gil Martin, and we talked about Four Nations. I mentioned some of the Capo stuff, but we also talked about Jordan Eberle. Now, we recorded this for Monday's show. Since we recorded, we did get the news that Jordan Eberle's conditioning stint with the Coachella Valley Firebirds has concluded. So I mentioned the Seattle Kraken are going to be hitting the road soon to go to Florida. They're going to spend some time in Florida, practice there, reunite there, and then play the Panthers. I was hoping to go to that game, but snow. So, I'm curious what's next for Jordan Eberle, and what does this mean for the Seattle Kraken roster if he is coming back soon? We will talk about that throughout the week, but here's a snippet from my conversation with Gil Martin. Again, this was for Monday's episode of Locked On NHL.
It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Kraken, Erica L. Ayala. And Erica, it's been a rough season at times for the Kraken, but there are some reasons for optimism right now. Let's start with Jordan Eberle, the captain. He's been out a long time. He is now finally on a rehab stint, starting that process of returning. Talk to me about what he means to this team and what his absence has meant to this team.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Gil, as you and I'm sure a lot of listeners and viewers know, the Seattle Kraken didn't have a captain after we traded Mark Giordano at the trade deadline of the inaugural season. So it's been a while since this team has had someone wear the letter C. I would say Eberle, Jaden Schwartz are up there, probably Jared McCann, with players that have taken on that leadership role, but it's been a long time coming. And so then for Eberle to get hurt so early in this season, he was hot out of the gate. He was just really getting things started offensively. He was on that Matty Beniers line. And then to have him go down and long-term have to have pelvic surgery, I mean, that's a long process. Anything, like that, you're going to be out for a while. So that's been tough. I think that his leadership has been missed with a consistent basis in the locker room, because when you're rehabbing, of course, they're just things that you're literally not doing with the team. So that's been a little bit tough. I think some players, Vince Dunn, when he came back from his injury, I think stepped up. But to know that Jordan Eberle is on the up and up. I mean, I've been to several Seattle games this season already, seeing him kind of crutch around the ice rink, and to see now that he can get back on the ice, that he's doing the conditioning and rehabilitation stint with the Coachella Valley Firebirds. We hope that's good news. The season is what it is at this point, right, Gil? So I don't think that there should be any pressure to rush him back for any reason. I think you want to make sure, though, that he's feeling good, that he has the conditioning, that he has the reps that he needs to feel good, so that he can come back and hopefully pick up right where he left off.
Talk to me briefly about your take on Four Nations, and from a Kraken perspective, how the players are faring.
Yeah, well, players is generous. It's just the one. It's Capo Caco. And we were kind of talking offline a little bit. So Capo Caco, he was actually a healthy scratch for Team Finland. Now, I don't know exactly what went into that decision. It was his birthday. To what extent that had something to do with it, I'm not really sure. I would tend to lean to no. It was just a decision made for hockey reasons, I'm sure. But Capo Caco, he didn't have a lot of ice time in that win over Sweden, but he used his minutes wisely. There was even a time where a lot of people thought that he had actually gotten one of the goals for Team Finland. He was right there with Barkov, who after looking at it, and I did sift through the film, everyone, but I agree. It was Barkov's goal, just barely. But the fact that, this is a young player who even himself said, hey, I was a little surprised. I feel like maybe they just ran out of Finnish players, and so they kind of picked me. That was his way of saying that he didn't feel that he performed the way that he can and that he likely should while he was with the Rangers. But he's already surpassed his numbers in fewer games with the Seattle Kraken. He now is on that Matty Beniers line and is making a huge impact.
Trade deadline is just a couple of weeks away once we get back from the Four Nations break. We've already seen some movement from the Kraken. What do you expect to happen at the trade deadline, and who may be available from the Kraken if they do sell?
Yeah, this is the question. I feel like every time we talk trade deadline, I'm like, we got to do something. And then not very much is done. And unfortunately, I'm kind of feeling that way again, including we talked about the Coachella Valley Firebirds and Jordan Eberle, but he's not the only player that started in the NHL and played for the Seattle Kraken in the NHL. That's now with the Firebirds. We have Daniel Sprong, who went through on waivers, but then also Philip Grubauer, who is a big ticket goaltender. So that's been a little bit disappointing. We came into this season knowing we were strapped at the salary cap and promised that moves would happen. Injuries happened instead, unfortunately. The team performed just a little bit better, just well enough to maybe stall some of that. So I do think that there need to be moves. It's not going to be comfortable for a lot of Seattle Kraken fans. We continue to hear names like Yanni Gourde, Brandon Tanev. Unfortunately, Yanni Gourde also dealing with an injury right now, but someone else. And again, Kraken fans, I think this might hurt the heartstrings, but we have to know that things like this are necessary. Jared McCann has gotten a little bit lost in the sauce this season. He's still one of our highest scorers as far as points overall, but he's had to work really hard. I don't see that with this offense and with who we have on the lines. I feel like he's kind of been sacrificed with kind of a Modge Podge line from time to time. And that's just not giving him the opportunities that we usually rely on him to score in. So I really do think, again, Jared McCann is probably a name, and this might be something, honestly, that McCann is okay with, but he's probably the big ticket item, so to speak, that might be on the move come the trade deadline. And I mentioned Philip Grubauer, and I want to say again that I don't think at this point it's realistic that he will be moved within the season, but there has to be some serious conversation in the offseason on what we're going to do from a goaltending perspective, because obviously it just hasn't been working out with Philip Grubauer. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on it than at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, you can bet on a fourth quarter comeback. You can stay in the action right on FanDuel. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. All right, Seattle hockey fans. So you heard me also talk with Gil at the end of that clip about some trade rumors. We've talked about that on Locked On Kraken. We will continue to keep a finger on the pulse. And again, there was some other Kraken news that happened while I was traveling that I want to get back to, but I wanted to catch us up on Four Nations because, of course, the big USA Canada game is coming up. You heard Trey and Rachel talk a little bit about it. And if you listen to the full clip from Locked On NHL, you also can hear me and Gil and I talking a little bit about it. Okay. So we have a few days. It's only Tuesday. Four Nations Faceoff Thursday. Rachel Donner is going to be there. Trey Matthews will be there. So we'll have more clips from them live from the event. But right now it's it's Jake Gensel and Zach Werenski that are leading the charge for the United States. Zach has 5 points overall as a defenseman. Gensel, 3 goals. He's had critical goals, timely goals, as we like to say in sports and in hockey specifically. Sidney Crosby is leading the way for Canada. Got that empty net goal as well against Finland, who almost made a comeback. Oh, that was exciting. That was so exciting. Was I rooting for Finland? Abso-freaking-lutely. And no, it had nothing with whether I want Canada to be the 51st state or not. Anyway, I digress. Nathan MacKinnon, 3 goals. And Sidney Crosby leads the team with 4 assists. Werenski, with 5 assists for the United States. Now, Canada's been going with Binnington the whole way. Also, it's maybe a little bit petty of me, but I said on my CBS Sports Hit, I thought that maybe Adin Hill would get a little more play for Hockey Canada. And so on the broadcast, they were saying, well, you could look at it that way because everyone's seeing the numbers. Adin Hill has good NHL numbers. Now, that doesn't always translate to international or quote unquote best on best. But as soon, I felt bad almost, but I found it funny. They were talking about Binnington and that he was doing a pretty good job. That's why you stick with him. And that's when the Finnish comeback, boom, 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 came. So that was a little tough. Oh, do they go with Adin Hill now against the United States? Gonna be interesting to see. On the other side of things, the guy who's given the Seattle Kraken nightmares, Connor Hellebuck. If you're rooting for the United States, then you like what you're seeing. It was actually Jake Oettinger that got the start the other night. Either way, you're not losing out. Connor has a 2-0 record, 1.00 goals against average, and a 9.57 save percentage. It's Oettinger. I said Oettinger or Oettinger. I feel like I'm like Dan Bilesma when he says Burakovsky when I try to say Oettinger. I overthink it. And then I get confused and I'm like, wait, what is his name actually? So Jake Oettinger, he did get that loss. That was a tough game against Sweden. And I thought Jake had a pretty good game. 2.06 goals against average, a 9.13 save percentage. That was a Swedish team that didn't want to lose. We also, as you heard from Trey and Rachel, the United States has been dealing with some pretty significant injuries, yes, but also maybe precautionary things. We've talked about it on the squad show. Some of these players came in and they weren't 100% healthy. We're in the middle of the NHL season. No one's 100% at this time of the season. And so some of those were precautionary measures. You also heard Trey and Rachel talk about Quinn Hughes. You heard them talk about Quinn Hughes is reportedly coming to the tournament. He was ruled out because of injury. So that would be huge. How much of this is just giving those guys a rest and maybe getting into Canada's head a little bit before the final? I guess we'll find out. And I actually am excited to find out. So that's going to be the puck drops Thursday. That's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's 5 p.m. Pacific time. And that will be on the ESPN platform. I think TNT had the last hand. I think they've been alternating, quite honestly. But I think I'm excited. I said this on one of the squad shows. Stick taps to Emily Kaplan. She does this even when it's not Four Nations Faceoff, but she always thanks people after an interview in the language native to their country. And I just think that's a really nice touch. It reminds people that, yes, this is an international tournament. And I've done that for athletes that I've covered in other places. And sometimes athletes don't always hear their language from their home country. very often when they play in the United States or North America. So I'm excited to see what ESPN has on tap for that. And we will talk about it here on Locked On Kraken. But let's get out of here on that. I feel like we went through a lot. More to discuss when it comes to the Seattle Kraken, who did not have practice today, Tuesday, but will hit the ice again, are headed to sunny Florida. I'm so jealous because there's literally snow piling up on my window right here in this studio, the home studio. But the Seattle Kraken, how they come out of this break is going to be huge. Lots of work to do, lots of pride to get back. And for some people, there's contracts on the line. So what is this team going? How is this team going to respond? What is this team going to look like? And what are we hearing from the higher ups? We'll get into all of that and more on the coming episodes of Locked On Kraken. But you know how we do. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Hold fast. Stay true. And let's go USA. Let's go Canada. But always, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.